So the company is Eximia. I'm the director of the company, Penny Reed, and we are very much a business solutions consultancy. So for my part, that means that we would go to a company and organisation, in particular schools, because I've got 15 years of experience and counting in schools, secondary and primary. And so it's very much about someone could come to us with a problem that needs a solution. They might come and say, look, we know our processes in HR aren't quite right. Please, can you come and do an independent audit, have a look at the processes, systems, and just talk to us about what we might need to do. That might mean that they want us to come back and do some more work, or they might, it might be that just having that conversation with someone, Eximia, that we say, actually, your systems aren't too bad, However, what you need to do is tighten up this bit or tighten up this bit. So we're very much solutions for individual organisations, and we're very much about looking at, okay, what's the impact that you're going to feel by having Eximia come in? So if we look at your processes, if we look at your people, if we look to offer you some training in a particular area that you feel you need to give to your work staff, then you need to feel that impact. And that's what we're about, because we, having had the experience I've had in schools, I know absolutely how much, the budgets are being squashed and squeezed further and further. But I also know that having really great support staff, as well as great teaching staff, and that extends to other organisations, will make your budget go further. It's that investment. If you invest in your people, if you invest in your processes, you should feel the difference in your budget. So very much I'm inspired by the young people, for absolute definite. It's one of the reasons I became instrumental in education as I became. Having worked in a secondary school in a really deprived area of London, I realised just how a school is their safe haven for some of these people. And these are our next generation. So having worked in that area and having realised that we had to make the budgets go further because we wanted to provide these students, these kids, with amazing opportunities, I realised what an amazing role I was able to play in that school and then in those young people's lives. So for me, I got to the point where things were running brilliantly. It's an outstanding academy, and I thought there's probably something like 11,000 schools across the UK, and that's not even talking about international schools. And if I can take some of that piece of magic that we created at this secondary school and just share that with other schools that might need it, then to me, that's what inspires me, because those students, everything you do and all of the decisions you make, and it's very similar, even if we're not talking about schools, should come back to the core of what are we there for. I think I'm being very fortunate. I've had lots of people that have been instrumental, perhaps in, dare I say it, my journey, professionally and personally. But definitely the principal I worked with in the last secondary school was just incredible. And I had everything in me and all of my toolkit, but just working with someone that was so passionate about education and changing the life chances. And that's what it was about, changing the life chances of these kids, really kind of just allowed me to flourish. And allowing me to flourish then gave me just grew my confidence completely. And just having that champion, it's like, you make such a difference to these students, has made me realise that I do. So, I think that's the kind of real inspiring part for me to go along and do my own, to set up Eximia and really show people what Eximia are about, and having those values. So everything, whatever school I've been in, whatever organisation I've been in, I've always held my same values, which is integrity, honesty, and just being responsive to those people's needs. So, whether I worked in the city, it didn't matter. I took those skills and those values to when I started working in education. And I think they will always stick with me. And that's made a huge difference. So I pretty much made my decision to create Eximia back towards the back end of last year. But I also knew that I didn't want to take anything away in terms of my commitment to my current role or my role that I was in at the time. So I really kind of focused on, you've still got a job to do here. You need to make sure that whoever takes over from you, they get the best possible handover, because I love it. It gets into your blood when you work in a school. And then in the background, it was very much about building the brand, really talking to people about what we were about, making sure that I knew that we had the right skills to deliver for these businesses, really starting off writing a business plan, knowing where I needed to start from and where I wanted to get to, thinking about creating my website, talking to other people within and around, small businesses. How do you find it? What do you do? How do you plan? And so it was just a case of just continue to build the kind of reputation and just build that name out there. So when people see that light bulb, they're kind of like, we know what that means. We know what that's about. We know if Eximia come in and help us and support us, we know absolutely what we're getting. So it's all about just starting to get people to talk about it. And then once we started to do some work, which has been in the last couple of months, just really going in there as if I'd been in that school for 4 years, and just feeling like people would come to me to talk to me about my expertise and just trust me from day one. Because, when it's done really well, leadership in schools and organisations, you almost look after it as if it's your own. And that's what I wanted to feel, that even if we were a consultancy firm, we'd treat them as if that organisation was our own, as if it was my full-time job. I think for me, what's unique about us is the kind of experience and expertise. I've lived and breathed schools for 15 years. I was in the private sector before that. And I know that you have to work hard. I know that you have to go in there and just have that open mind. I also feel that we are very much going to be about finding solutions and building that capacity. So I don't want to go in there as a consultancy and just work solidly for 6 months. What we want to do is go in there, talk to them, find out what's happening, look at the systems, do a review, and then say, okay, this is what you need to do. We can support you, but ideally we want to help you grow the capacity so that it's not that kind of cycle of having to come back constantly for support. So it's that capacity building, I think, that kind of is more unique. I think when I go into a school, often what you find is that the processes aren't robust enough. So they'll have a process, and this is not across all schools, but sometimes there's been a very much, we've always done it this way approach. And obviously the kind of conversion from LA schools, local authority schools, to academies meant that schools were playing catch up a little. So they had to get this expertise in. And you know what? They've got so many hard workers, but sometimes the hard workers get put into positions that might not be quite right for them. So actually it's a fresh pair of eyes that can go in and they can say, okay, this isn't quite right. Let's have a look at putting this process in. Let's have a look at looking at it from this viewpoint. Does everything go back to your strategic plan? Does everything go back to your improvement plan? And, what you're saying you're doing, are you doing that? Where's your quality assurance? So that's the kind of first part. And I think the other part of it is schools have to realise that they are almost businesses now. So we've gone past these days where we had lots of support from the local authority. they have, you know, a lot of schools have to manage on their own, or they have if it's a bigger trust, they might go to a central function. But on the ground floor, day to day, operationally, they still have to know how to like look after their staff. They still need to know how to do these HR processes properly, so they don't find themselves in a tribunal 6 months down the road. So it's looking at ways that can prevent them having to go through the pain of a potential human resource case. You know, how can we stop that happening? Rather, I guess, to sum it up, it's about being proactive rather than reactive. So if you've got everything in place and you have those strong systems and they're applied consistently, then hopefully you can avoid having some of the kind of potential dramas, and then that has a huge impact on the budget later down the line. Ideally, what I want is for Eximia to really be the go-to support for schools and organisations, and growing the business so that we almost have a bespoke IT department, a bespoke finance, a bespoke HR, you know, all of those central functions, no matter what organisation you're in, that make a difference between being successful or being seriously successful. You know, that's where I see it, that I just want to grow at the speed that's right for us and for the organisations that that come to us. But ideally, what I really want is to have real experts in all of those areas and have them working in little hubs so that we can expand from the UK to international schools and really support anybody that needs that support from us. I think lockdown has, it's difficult because I think on a personal level, much of my work, particularly once the initial consultation's been done, can be done remotely. But I think for me, it's about organisations in particular recognising that there's a piece of work to be done with staff coming back, because to work remotely for anywhere between a month and 6 months is really hard. And I think staff will be anxious, they may be nervous. There also may be an element of, actually, I used to do 14-hour days or 12-hour days, and I've had a bit more time at home with my family. So I think organisations are going to have to really switch into this. How can we support them? Because clearly remote working for some organisations has worked really well. So can we be more flexible? Can we have a little bit more of a flexible workforce, knowing that that the outcomes and the kind of goals are still achievable, we can still achieve. And I think there's a really big piece of work that kind of leaders in organisations really need to sit down and think, okay, much the same as people and organisations are to be really agile. So, lockdown for some organisations, I know and I understand, has been catastrophic, and we've lost some great companies and organisations from different sectors. But then you've also seen some of them becoming incredibly agile in terms of having to really redefine what they deliver. Now, if they can do that, I think that they still need to realise that people are at the core of what they deliver, and therefore we might need to just look at things slightly differently. What are we going to do to make sure that when the staff do come back, on whatever basis they come back, are they happy? Do they feel supported? Are we considering that they might be anxious? And all of those factors. So I think that there's a real piece of work, and I think it has to come from the leaders, and then it kind of filters down. And that's going to be, the biggest challenge, I think. So I think, my biggest dream is really to have Eximia really supporting schools in particular, so that we can have more consistency in terms of the delivery of service to those kids. Because yes, of course, it's about teaching and learning without a shadow of a doubt. And schools are measured on that as their outcomes, whether we like it or not. But how about what we do in terms of increasing their cultural capital, as we talk about? You know, those kids that haven't, I remember taking a group of students to the Lake District, and some of them had never, ever, ever been outside of London. And they're sitting on a coach saying, there's a sheep. We've not seen a sheep before. You know, and just having that impact and allowing schools the breathing space. So if Eximia can go in and help and support and find those solutions and give that head teacher or principal the breathing space to say, look, we've got the support areas sorted, that means we can focus on teaching and learning. That's what I want to do.